Let's dive right into what stands as one of the most pivotal moments in international finance over the last half-century. This marks a turning point packed with serious consequences for the worldwide economic framework that's guided affairs for generations, touching everything from cross-border commerce flows to the strategies nations craft for their own growth and stability. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia chose not to contact the President of the United States. He also bypassed the top officials in China and Russia. Instead, his conversation went directly to Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And the understanding reached in that exchange has triggered urgent discussions inside the United States Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and central banking institutions across the planet, as specialists work methodically to map out the complete picture and potential long-term fallout from this startling move that caught so many watchers completely off guard. Saudi Arabia and Canada have forged a $1 trillion energy and economic collaboration. This far-reaching pact explores essential fields including energy resources, critical minerals, cross-border investments, cutting-edge technology, and the supporting structures for financial operations with real depth and detail. Each sector involves major pledges that promise to guide their joint efforts far into the future, building a strong platform for sustained teamwork and advantages that benefit both partners equally. But the detail sending shockwaves through global currency trading more than any other sits inside one specific provision of the deal. That provision lays out that all future energy exchanges between the nations will use a mixed group of currencies made up of the euro, the Chinese yuan, the British pound, and an innovative digital currency overseen together by the Bank of Canada and the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. The United States dollar receives no place whatsoever in this setup. This omission stems from careful planning, not any oversight, and shows the deliberate strategy both sides brought to the table. For the first time since 1974, a notable share of worldwide oil commerce will be valued and completed beyond the dollar framework. It is worth stressing that this covers only a fraction of total global oil activity. It comes to about 4%. Still, that 4% proves sufficient to open the first genuine fracture in a foundation that had remained solid throughout the modern period. And once a foundation shows its first crack, the actual width matters far less than the undeniable reality that a break has now occurred, because it forces a fresh look at assumptions about enduring stability and reliability in the international financial architecture that so many had simply accepted as unchanging for decades. Within hours after the news broke, the dollar slipped 2.3% during a single trading day. Gold values climbed higher as participants turned toward classic safe assets amid the fresh uncertainty. The euro gained ground relative to the dollar while the yuan posted solid advances in trading activity. Yields on treasury bonds edged upward, mirroring the evolving views among investors reacting to the announcement. Currency traders avoided any kind of exaggerated panic in their moves. Rather, they carried out thoughtful recalibrations in response to a basic structural evolution that may hold enduring effects on how global commerce and reserve holdings get handled ahead, encouraging a careful reassessment by all involved. The Federal Reserve conducted private briefings for the United States Senate Banking Committee regarding the situation. Senators representing both major parties swiftly called for an emergency combined hearing so they could examine the broader ramifications in closer detail. President Trump reached out personally to the Saudi Crown Prince to request a review of the agreement's central features. The Crown Prince declined. Their discussion lasted 11 minutes. This presentation employs advanced AI technology for delivery. All details draw from confirmed reporting and openly available financial and policy examinations. To appreciate why this carries such profound importance, we need to step back to 1974 and review the historical backdrop that formed the system we have known. Following the 1973 oil crisis that drove the American economy into recession and created widespread hardships for households and companies alike, the Nixon administration held talks with the Saudi royal family and secured an understanding. It never became a formal treaty passing through normal approval processes. Congress never cast a vote on it. No public statement appeared at the time. It remained a confidential accord between the two governments that quietly transformed global trade, finance, and geopolitical dynamics in lasting ways that shaped generations afterward. The core terms were direct and practical. Saudi Arabia committed to valuing all its oil sales in U.S. dollars. Every nation requiring Saudi oil, and nearly every industrialized economy did at that stage, would therefore maintain supplies of U.S. dollars for payments. In exchange, the United States promised military protection for Saudi Arabia along with access to American arms and security assurances. In the years that followed, additional OPEC members gradually adopted the same approach. By the early 1980s, almost all global oil commerce operated in dollars. The Petrodollar arrangement stood firmly established, generating a self-sustaining cycle that bolstered American currency leadership in markets around the world. The results of that arrangement reached far and wide. Most Americans never experienced them firsthand because the gains operated quietly in the background of ordinary life, feeling simply normal and lasting. Since oil carried dollar pricing, every country required reliable access to dollars for vital energy purchases. They obtained those dollars by exporting large quantities of goods and services to the United States. That pattern helps explain why American consumers enjoyed relatively low-cost imported items for 50 years, sustaining the broad selection and high consumption levels many now view as standard. Countries also invested their dollar holdings by buying U.S. Treasury bonds. That consistent demand for treasuries enabled the American government to borrow at comparatively modest interest rates, despite carrying substantial debt loads over many decades. And because much of global commerce flowed through the dollar system, the United States acquired effective power to apply financial sanctions that extended worldwide with real force. Any nation excluded from dollar dealings found itself largely unable to purchase oil on open markets, granting the arrangement strong influence in diplomatic matters. The whole sequence begins from a single foundation. Oil carries dollar pricing. Alter that foundation and each connected element starts to loosen gradually, opening the door to wider adjustments throughout the international financial environment that could develop over time in meaningful fashion. Now consider the individuals who brought this fresh arrangement into being. Mohammed bin Salman serves as Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He oversees the planet's largest proven oil reserves, granting him exceptional leverage in energy markets globally. His family's earlier choice in 1974 played a key role in establishing the original petrodollar framework. The decisions he makes today carry weight matched by very few figures anywhere. Mark Carney holds the position of Prime Minister in Canada, yet his unique relevance here stems from his deep experience in central banking and financial systems. He previously led the Bank of Canada. Later he guided the Bank of England. He remains the only current head of government worldwide who has directed two leading central banks in his career. He grasps the construction of reserve currency systems, the ways they endure different economic cycles, and the methods for redesigning them when circumstances evolve. He brings expert insight into payment clearing mechanisms, exchange rate oversight, and the rules required to establish a workable substitute for dollar-based settlements. Saudi Arabia possessed the oil supplies, the financial resources, and the incentive to seek greater variety in its options. What it required was a partner capable of designing and implementing an alternative financial structure with genuine credibility and technical precision. Carney filled that role perfectly. The phone call served as the catalyst that united these strengths in a concrete manner. Now here is precisely what the two sides committed to within the partnership. The agreement organizes itself around 5 connected yet distinct pillars. The first centers on energy and dedicates $400 billion to merging Canadian oil and gas output with Saudi refining and worldwide distribution networks. This forms a coordinated supply operation between two major energy players, boosting overall efficiency and expanding market access for each through better alignment. The second pillar addresses critical minerals and assigns $200 billion to linking Canadian mineral deposits with Saudi petrochemical processing strengths, reinforcing supply lines for materials that play growing roles in contemporary manufacturing. The third pillar focuses on investment and sets aside $200 billion for a shared fund directed by Saudi Arabia's public investment vehicle and Canadian pension resources, with holdings maintained outside dollar currencies to advance the partnership's larger objectives. The fourth pillar targets technology and allocates $100 billion toward pairing Canadian leadership in artificial intelligence and sustainable energy with Saudi funding and market access, spurring progress in vital new sectors. Each of those initial 4 pillars would qualify as a substantial accord by itself, carrying major economic significance and strategic harmony between the participants. Yet they all supported the 5th pillar, the one that truly altered the landscape and drew worldwide focus. That 5th pillar dedicates $100 billion toward constructing the payment infrastructure that values all energy exchanges between the countries outside the dollar entirely. Oil, natural gas, and processed products will carry pricing in the selected basket of currencies that features the euro, the yuan, the pound, and the new digital token operated jointly by the Bank of Canada and the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. The dollar appears nowhere in the basket. The provision applies to roughly 3 to 4 million barrels of oil daily. That equals about 4% of global oil commerce. The volume alone falls short of toppling the dollar immediately, yet that misses the essential point. The real significance lies in the example it creates and the message it broadcasts to traders and governments everywhere. For the first time since the petrodollar arrangement took shape, a leading oil supplier has formally valued a meaningful quantity of its product beyond the dollar. A practical system now operates in reality. A model exists for others to examine and possibly follow. And the very nation that originated the petrodollar concept has now given official backing to the notion that oil need not rely exclusively on dollar pricing. Every additional oil-producing country that had pondered stepping away from the dollar suddenly possesses resources it previously lacked. It now has a tested example, an operational mechanism, and the protective endorsement of Saudi Arabia that frames the choice as prudent financial diversification instead of mere political positioning. Currency markets responded swiftly to the announcement. The dollar fell 2.3% in one session. Gold, the euro, and the yuan all posted gains as investors rebalanced their portfolios. Treasury yields increased, indicating some softening in overseas appetite for American government securities at the edges. Markets avoided chaotic panic. They performed calm repricing of an emerging structural reality. The Federal Reserve treated the matter with seriousness and thoroughness internally. The Fed chair conducted a private briefing for the Senate Banking Committee and labeled the currency provision the most notable challenge to dollar leadership observed throughout his professional life. The briefing became public within 2 days. It featured scenario modeling that followed the provision's possible effects from energy markets through to the monthly finances of typical American households, highlighting the interconnected character of these systems in straightforward language. The reasoning flows in a clear sequence. Reduced oil trading in dollars translates to lower overall global need for the currency. Lower demand for dollars leads nations to purchase fewer U.S. Treasury bonds. Fewer bond purchases require the United States to provide higher interest rates to draw investors. Higher Treasury rates push up costs for mortgages, auto loans, and corporate borrowing because Treasury rates serve as the foundation for nearly all other domestic interest rates. The Fed projected that should the Saudi-Canadian model extend to only 3 more oil producers and produce a 5% drop in worldwide dollar demand, typical American mortgage rates might climb between 75 hundredths and 1.5 percentage points on a $400,000 home loan. That would add between $180 and $360 to monthly payments. This figure moves beyond abstract foreign policy discussion. It represents tangible dollars leaving family budgets each month and directly influencing housing costs and household stability. 12 senators from both parties answered by requesting an emergency joint session involving the Banking and Foreign Relations Committees. The cross-party response underscores a vital reality. Escalating mortgage rates and borrowing expenses affect citizens without regard to political loyalty. The economic outcomes of reduced dollar reliance touch every American household, no matter their voting preferences or party ties. Warren Buffett spoke directly on the topic in his remarks. He characterized the reserve currency advantage as the single most precious asset the United States has ever held. He placed it above the military, above the technology sector, and above the combined value of all American real estate. That privilege delivers trillions in measurable benefits. It enables government borrowing at favorable terms. It supports consumer access to affordable imports. It extends the global effectiveness of American sanctions. And each of those benefits hinges on one central requirement: oil priced in dollars. Buffett then compared the situation to the historical path of the British pound. The pound maintained dominant reserve status for roughly 150 years. It underwrote the British Empire and handled much of international trade throughout that era. Its decline occurred not through abrupt collapse, but via gradual persistent erosion. One trade settlement in francs here, a colonial power holding dollar reserves alongside pound holdings there, an oil deal using a mixed currency basket elsewhere. Each small fissure appeared insignificant initially. Analysts routinely dismissed them, convinced pound leadership remained permanent and unassailable. Then in the late 1940s, the cumulative pressure reached a critical threshold, and the shift accelerated faster than anyone anticipated. Buffett observed that the dollar now follows a parallel course. The fissures have accumulated steadily for years. China conducting trade settlements in yuan, Russia valuing energy in rubles, the BRICS group advocating for substitutes. Each step met dismissal using the identical explanations British observers offered during the 1930s. The alternatives lack scale. The supporting systems remain unprepared. Nothing rivals the liquidity of the leading currency. Those points held true for the pound in 1935. They proved mistaken for the pound in 1950. In Buffett's judgment, the Saudi-Canadian provision places the dollar in a more exposed position. Not because 4% of oil commerce can single-handedly dismantle dollar leadership, but because the example now stands established. The workable model now exists, and the country that constructed the petrodollar framework has formally endorsed the possibility of operating differently. 3 additional oil-producing nations acted promptly afterward. The United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Nigeria each opened official discussions with the Saudi-Canadian structure within 1 week of the announcement. A Saudi representative described the talks as preliminary, yet the rapid pace conveyed a clearer narrative. These nations had observed the United States applying economic measures against Canada, one of its closest partners, over recent months. They reached a logical conclusion. A financial architecture that can function as leverage against an ally today could readily serve the same purpose against any participant tomorrow. Trump's direct call to the Saudi Crown Prince 72 hours following the announcement itself signaled the level of concern in Washington. Reports from both parties indicate Trump requested that Mohammed bin Salman reconsider the currency provision. He framed it as a request. The Crown Prince refused. He explained that the choice advanced Saudi Arabia's sovereign goal of broadening its financial risks and remained closed to revision. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. American representatives termed it frank. Saudi representatives termed it clear. In the language of diplomacy, those descriptions carry identical meaning. The response was negative. Here is the current situation. Saudi Arabia and Canada have finalized a $1 trillion partnership that values oil beyond the US dollar for the first time since 1974. Currency markets have already adjusted the dollar lower in reaction. The Federal Reserve has alerted Congress that outcomes may encompass elevated mortgage rates and greater borrowing expenses for American families. 3 more oil-producing nations have launched consultations that could lead them to adopt the framework. The BRICS group now possesses a functioning model and Saudi approval for efforts toward reduced dollar reliance that once existed only as concepts. A direct appeal from the President of the United States to withdraw the currency provision met refusal during an 11-minute phone call. The Petrodollar framework arose from mutual confidence between two countries. It now faces restructuring because that confidence has diminished. Whether the dollar can preserve its reserve currency role, whether American households can manage the economic pressures from declining global dollar demand, and whether the United States can restore the confidence that supported the system for 50 years represent the central economic challenges of the coming period. What do you believe will unfold next? Will the dollar retain its standing, or does this mark the start of an extended transition? Offer your perspective in the comments section below. Subscribe to Some News for daily factual coverage of United States political and economic developments. This presentation employs advanced AI technology for delivery. All content draws from verified reporting and publicly available financial and policy sources.